So, you've picked up a kill team, and you know you need to score victory points to win. How exactly do you figure out the path to accomplishing this? Today, I'll help you figure out your team's win condition by walking you through some game fundamentals that apply not only to kill team, but games as a whole. This advice matters in pretty much every competitive game, but it's not talked a lot about in the kill team space. Most games are balanced around you intending to win, even if you're not, quote, playing to win and being a sweat lord. We play these games to have fun. I think my favorite games of Kill Team are when we both have a strong sense of the game and how it works. It's my whole motivation for making these videos. The better people are informed, the better players they are, and the more fun we have. One commonality in games with factions or tailored decks like Magic the Gathering or even Twilight Imperium is what is known as a win condition. This is essentially your path to win the game, and it's different than everyone else's plan, even if you're both scoring victory points. Thus, when you're playing Kill Team, it's a good idea to think about your win condition or your path to victory. Each team has a different path to victory, and by knowing not only your path, but the opponent's, you'll be a better player. I'm going to start by looking at the variables we have in Kill Team that get us to a victory. The two main obvious variables are primary victory points and tac-op victory points. This is mechanically how you win a game of Kill Team. Your goal is to have more victory points than your opponent. In a tournament, your goal is to score maximum victory points in both categories. And so we'll look at primary and tac-op victory points separately. After that, we'll look at the various ways to interact with the scoring system. So first, primary victory points. There are currently 3 kinds of missions in Kill Team. You have Loot, Secure, and Capture. These are the new match play points that we have going for us here. And the former 2 require you to use AP to do an action on an objective, whereas Capture requires you to simply sit on top of an objective to secure it. Every Kill Team has a preferred mission type. While I can just list who likes what, the primary point of this video is to get you a sense of why, so let's take a look at Loot, for example. Loot scores its points when you spend 1 AP to tap the objective, and you can only score each marker 3 times per game. So what does this really do for the game? Well, it makes it so that you need to score them before your opponent does, or prevent your opponent from tapping them. For example, Vet Guard and Corsairs have some excellent free dashes and improved movement that allow them to tap 4 objectives in the first turning point if they're allowed to. Meanwhile, Higher Attack Circle's Nanomine slows the movement of your opponents down to a crawl around a fixed point, so it does a great job of stopping these sort of teams from doing that exact thing that they're good at. Having to spend 1 AP to do this means that elite teams struggle. However, with a team like Phobos, who have free mission actions from Vanguard, they can really shine. By contrast, Capture is one of the Corsairs' least favorite missions because they want to be moving, and Capture requires you to sit still. Capture is great for teams like Legionaries who want to be a slow, moving tide that eats up the board before you can outscore them. Slower teams that are durable like Vet Guard are classic fans of Capture, but teams like Intercessors can also enjoy it too because they're durable and fast, which means that they can afford to spend that 1 turn capturing their own objectives before going to clear out the rest of the board without needing to keep someone sitting there scoring objectives in the back point. But when you play Kill Team in a tournament, you don't get to choose your team based on the mission. So this means that we need to figure out your win condition for each of the objectives, even the ones your team might suck at. So let's take my favorite team as an example, right? Vet Guard. Vet Guard dominates on loot due to their ability to get out onto objectives quickly and trade models on these objectives to score. Being able to trade one of their 14 models for 1 victory point is excellent. However, on a mission like Capture, scoring is not so assured until the turning point is over, which means that a model thrown onto an objective without cover won't gain that victory point for sure. We can help prevent this by placing barricades onto key objectives that we need to score early, while setting up to contest the further objectives with APL saturation. Remember, having 2 APL operatives will capture an objective that is held by 1 APL Space Marine. Primary VP isn't the whole story though, there's also tac-ops. There's 4 archetypes: Seek and Destroy, Security, Infiltration, and Recon, and each team has access to 1 or more of these. If your team has a choice, this choice is significant as it sets the stage for how you will play the board. Confident that you can kill enemy operatives near objectives with their leader, then Seek and Destroy is excellent. Do you want to sit on objectives and have spare APL models who can contest parts of the board? Then security is beautiful. Recon and infiltration both require you to spend actions or move onto parts of the board that aren't as accessible as security, but you score these points with much more abruptness and consistency if you can do it, so they're great for teams who can afford to cash them in. When choosing your archetype, there's a lot of factors to consider that aren't just mechanical scoring, and these factors are the ones most key to determining your win condition, so that's what we'll touch on next. We've looked at the mechanical ways of scoring, but that alone doesn't determine your win condition. We have a bunch of other ways to interact with this scoring system, and that's usually by interacting with the opposing player's models. This usually looks like killing enemy models, but there's also some less apparent ways of controlling the board and objectives. These include things like stacking debuffs and creating dangerous threat zones around the board. While a team like Commandos might not be shooting you off the board in turn 1, they depend their first turn on often creating these danger zones by using what we usually call threat ranges. In simple terms, a threat range is the number of inches an enemy operative can mess you up in. If you're taking a standard guy with, say, 6 inches of normal movement, this means they have a turned range of 8 inches, because 6 inches plus 2, but they also have a threat range of 9 inches because they only need to be barely an inch within range of your operative. Or you can take a Meltagun, for example. If you have 3 APL on this Meltagun operative and a 6-inch move, that means he can move 6 inches, then dash 3, and shoot 6. This gives him a threat range of 15 inches. These threat ranges do not actually need to be used to be impactful to the game. Oftentimes, we can be eager to get close enough to an enemy and shoot them right away, but sometimes holding back your Meltagun can be good. Keeping them within threat range of, say, 2 objective markers, it might severely hamper a Space Marine player. If they're good, they'll see this threat and it'll force them to play differently and not score, or they'll have to ignore it to score. They'll move forward and then position in a way that your Meltagun can safely respond. How does this play into determining your win condition? Well, let's say you're not as fast as some of the other teams. Say you're playing higher tech circle. You move quite slowly, so you won't be able to get onto objectives right away, but that doesn't mean you're useless. In fact, they are really strong at these other aspects of controlling the game. As I mentioned before, they have some strong movement debuffs with the nanomine and can create some really nasty trades with their resurrection ability. These aspects make them great at playing a war of attrition and enable them to thrive in the long game. Removing enemy models straight up can't be discounted either, and it's central to a lot of teams. The Kazarkin rely heavily on this feature of the team. They're great at shooting super consistently and will often one-shot models. And while they suck at scoring primary VP outright, they're able to kill enemy models so effectively at range that it'll modify this weakness. Sure, they're paper thin, they're not great at getting on objectives, but if they shot off 3 of your legionaries, they'll be able to score if your 3 remaining legionaries are forced to go score other objectives. 3 objectives for you, that leaves the rest for the Kazarkin, and they also have great tac ops for this. Seek and Destroy plays directly into the Kazarkin's game plan. Let's take all this theoretical stuff and put it into practice with my tournament-winning team, the Vet Guard. What's the win condition of this team? Well, let's look at its aspects first. It's a 14-model team, meaning it's a horde team. That's already telling us something about how it works and what it's useful for. It'll probably be good at loot because it doesn't have a lot of health. It probably is not going to have a lot of APL per model, but it's going to be able to out-activate some teams. The teams will have more APL available to them overall than, say, another 10-model team with 2 APL. The Vet Guard specifically have strong abilities that increase their movement and shooting, but nothing great in terms of melee or durability, so this means we'll be able to use that model count to move quickly onto objectives in the first turning point and shoot at range with our gunners. But how does all of this stuff get us to win the game? Well, our tac ops are all in the security archetype, and the best faction tac op, Stand Fast, requires us to go hold more objectives than the opponent. With the security archetype usually playing so well around objective markers, we'll be able to spend most of our time running at objective markers and sitting on them to score. Knowing that the ways we score require us to go run at objectives, and knowing we're fast, plentiful, and paper thin means that we know we have to play aggressively in order to score those objectives. We need to have more primary VP than the opponent by the end of turning point 2 and have enough operatives left to be able to go even in the last 2 rounds while focusing on our attack ops. What about another example? Let's look at the Intercession's win condition. So the things we know they're fast, we know they're durable, but they have a low model count. They only got 6 operatives. They fight really well, but don't have a lot of AP. They have great alpha strike into horde teams with the Auspex placed onto the grenade launcher operative. With seek and destroy or security, you're given 2 apparent playstyles. One is to go out and pluck enemy models off of objectives to score attack ops while taking those primary victory points in the process. Or you can hunker down on your half of the board, but with a fast, durable, and low model count team, do we want to really be hunkering down with security? This is where matchups become really important. Intercessors versus, say, Warmblade, a horde team, puts them in a great spot for seek and destroy. We know that Warmblade will have to push aggressively up on the board to secure primaries and their own tack ups because they have either seek and destroy or infiltration, which will put them on your half of the board when they're trying to score infiltration. You can totally score eliminate guards with ease by charging 2 operatives and fighting them both, or charging, fighting, and shooting on objectives. However, intercessors against legionaries might be more tricky. An intercessor player going aggressively for seek and destroy might not be able to consistently cover enough ground to be able to guarantee it, and if played poorly, it could put you in a position where you're sitting out for a Melta or Plasma to knock you off your feet. On Into the Dark, security can be scored quite consistently with central control or seize access point. Ultimately, by playing your team and understanding its strengths and weaknesses in a diverse number of situations, you'll be able to figure out which of your strengths bring you closer to maximizing victory points, as well as what weaknesses you need to avoid allowing your opponent to leverage. And as a final point on strengths, I want to talk about combos. This is a more traditional win condition aspect that folks talk about in games like Magic, where you have a series of cards that you want to play that will nuke your opponent's life and board. But in Kill Team, teams have combos like this that are able to get them a key advantage. Breacher's Breach and Clear ability can get tremendous value off in one dual activation, which could potentially wipe out 2 or more enemy operatives in a matter of seconds. Corsair's tremendous Alpha Strike with Plasma Grade at the first turning point can completely decimate horde teams that position poorly. Harlequin's turn 1 Death Jester Vantage Point strike sets them up for the whole game by beginning their Sadef. These kinds of combos are core to many kill teams and are the bread and butter of controlling the board and allowing you to score. Like I've said before, knowing the depths of your team and others will put you in the driver's seat. And that's it for today. Folks expressed interest in more metascale talk about the game like this, so I hope this was helpful. If you want to support this hobby of mine, there's a coffee donation link in the description, as well as a link to my Instagram where I post all my hobby activities. I'll be grabbing the Inquisition kill team here soon and absolutely fixating on that project, so I'll probably have a video on that eventually. Until then, thanks for watching.